7 o'clock. Yeah, where's that remote? This
Right
thing.
there. No, I don't think that's the camera. That's all right. You can jump for like speeding up for it. I'll let you finish admitting people and then I'll.
It's fine.
All right.
Video is cutting off the heads of people in the middle of the table.
We don't know how to control it, so sorry.
Ah, matchbook under the front leg.
All right, it is 7 o'clock and I will call the meeting to order. First up, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? No, okay. Next would be privilege of the floor. We do have. Oh, they're not. One public hearing, yes, one public hearing tonight. So if you want to speak specifically on the Waldorf School for the public hearing, that will happen in a little bit. Otherwise, if anyone would like to speak on privilege of the floor, Rhonda? You there? There you
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everybody. I just want to ask Greg to explain the whole situation with the archaeological site that's mentioned in the Nelson Road or on the Nelson Road property. I don't really understand where that came from or I just like an explanation, and I think that it should be done now rather than during the hearing. I mean, a hearing is when people are supposed to be speaking their mind rather than learning about a site. So I'd like him to explain it now. Thank you.
Maybe we just go through all the other.
Okay,
Privileges before. And then
go ahead, Ned.
I didn't quite hear what Greg said, but if he wants to explain now, I'd be,
No, it's okay. We'll take care of that first and then Greg will follow up.
oh, okay. I'm speaking about your other case, the West Jersey Hill Road subdivision. You know, when this first came up to the planning board, my immediate reaction was, well, this should just go to the BZA because all he really wants is a 5-acre lot in a 10-acre zone. And maybe that would have been the right way to go, but it has developed since then. And I read, I looked at the drawing that's attached to the agenda today, and I read Greg's analysis. And I think what's being proposed now actually begins to make some sense. I didn't quite understand where Greg got the figure that 80% of the land is going to be preserved as open space, but it's question whether it's 84%, 75, whatever. It looks like most of it is going to remain open space, which I think is a good thing. And it really sounds like what's being proposed is what the public, in its naivete, which includes me, would consider a cluster. I don't know that many people would want to live if fully expanded the additional units in such a tight space. I don't know that many people would want to live there, but that would be a cluster. It's too bad that it's taken this long and so much trouble. So that's just my thoughts about what Greg is describing, if I've understand it correctly. And I'd like to say that Jacob has been a gentleman about this, but I would feel better, just as a matter of appearance, that when it's being discussed, he should remove himself from his seat at the table and participate as a member of the public, rather than sort of having a ambiguous position in the middle of the table. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else for privilege of the floor? No, okay.
You want to go over?
You wanna go over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
archaeological?
So I can share my screen. So last time when the planning board was looking at, the Waldorf School Short Environmental Assessment Form 12B. Question 12B, you know, we go through these environmental assessment forms pretty routinely. And so the 12B asked the question on the short environmental assessment form, is the project site or any portion of it located in or adjacent to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Office Archaeological Site Inventory? And that answer is yes. So somebody on the planning board asked, why is it yes? And can we look into that? So the best reasoning I have for why it got checked, and I'll share my screen somewhere. Oh, hang on. I have to actually allow myself to share my screen. Oops.
Are you the host or is Cindy?
Cindy does. I think I'm a co-host. Yeah, I thought I was a co-host too. Wow, we always do this. This always happens. Let me try that again.
Sharing permissions in the arrow next to share.
I'm here. Let's see. Sure, I'll just say. Got it. Okay. Well, nobody else try to share anything, please. Let me just share. Okay, so New York State has the Cultural Resource Information System, and so this is a database of archaeological surveys. If you ever want to check if there's a property that's on the state's environmental, or excuse me, archaeological or sensitive archaeologically or historic properties, it's called CRIS, Cultural Resource Information System. So there is a big transmission line project happening. And actually, if we zoom out, it's this whole, part doesn't show if I zoom out that far. It's this, if you can see my mouse, it's this large transmission line that cuts all the way, well, from Coddington and even I think out towards Watkins Glen. In fact, if we look at it in a different way, it'll show.
The West Danby, Southwest Danby there we're looking at.
This is this is part, it includes part of the property. This is what I'm getting at, is that.
Oh, what is,
So no, this is Nelson Road right here. Here's the Waldorf School right here. And so basically in this, the transmission line is here in green. And when you click on it, it says that there was a historic resources survey for the NYSEG CLCPA program, Finger Lakes area infrastructure reliability projects from Schuyler County and Tompkins County. We were actually given notice of this from NYSEG a few months ago, but it turns out as part of this transmission, and maybe Joel knows more about it, I saw him might try to speak, but it looks like they did an archaeological survey. You see these brown lines right here.
So anything in that boundary
In
triggers.
right, and maybe that's 1,000 feet, you know, who knows what the boundary is, but there were certain buildings in this corridor that were surveyed. If you zoom in even further, you can see, so all the red means they're not eligible. So somebody at the state went out and did a survey of properties, and it looks like that there was a property down here that is eligible, 1240 Danby Road. So my best guess of why this was checked was that there was this survey being done, and it was deemed that there was a property that's adjacent to the Waldorf School that is considered eligible. And so when you look on the state's seeker workbook and you kind of go through how do you answer the question on part 2 of the short environmental assessment form. If 12B is answered yes, so if the proposed project is in an archaeological sensitive area, then there may be an impact, and this impact must be evaluated as to its size. So then the next question is, if there is an impact, how big will it be? So the reviewing agency, the planning board, must evaluate the magnitude of that impact. So what is the impact of this subdivision on these potential sensitive resources in the area? And how big will they be? So this depends on the overall scale and context of the project. So the reviewing agency should be reasonable when conducting this review. And then it goes on, instructing the reviewing agency how to assess a small impact versus a moderate to large impact. And it seemed based on what I had that it's a small impact could occur if there are no historic or archaeological resources on the site. That's one. And then there are archaeological resources in the vicinity of the project, but a site-specific inventory shows that there are none on the project site. So it looks like it's part of this survey that had happened, that somebody trained enough to be, competent enough to be input on their system. Somebody actually did go to the Waldorf school property and probably looked at the building, determined it wasn't eligible for anything. And looks like it's across the street here too. I think Nelson Road, it was deemed eligible. So, and those are all the buildings that encompass, or that are, even though the survey looks like might not go all the way into the very southern portions of the property. I'm guessing there's somewhere, maybe around Buttermilk Lane, kind of across the street. There's no buildings down there, so there wouldn't be nothing archaeological, or excuse me, at least historic, right? So in terms of, if this is a moderate to a large impact, I mean, just as an example, this would be if historic structures are planned to be demolished or relocated. That's not going to happen with this proposal. Historic structures are to be remodeled in a way that destroys or damages its historic value. That's not going to happen with this proposal. Archaeological resources are present on the actual site and will be removed, covered, or built on in a manner which makes it impossible to recover artifacts in the future. That's not going to happen. This is a subdivision of land. The project introduces an architectural design that is not consistent with an existing historic district that's not part of this project. And the project changes the character or view of important aesthetic resources. So with that, if the reviewing agency has determined that there are no impacts or that only a small impact may occur, no further analysis of this topic is needed. Simply check the box no, or small impact may occur next to the question and move on to question 9.
Thank you.
Chris is a great resource. It's open. It's a public resource. So I'll stop there.
All right. Moving on from privilege of the floor, approval of minutes from January.
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second.
No, go ahead.
I'll second. That's Kelly. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. All right. Joel, are you giving our town liaison report?
Well, I can give you something because Leslie's in New York City. I'm looking at what we've done that might be of interest to the planning board. I don't know how much of this is of interest, but we're going to probably on Thursday pass a property tax exemption for Cold War veterans, which is a peculiar component of the existing law. What might be of interest to you is that we have these various exemptions that we deal with, and we deal with them as we are able because we're only able to do so because the state enables us to do it. So instead of looking at the whole need, saying, are there people of modest or low incomes who need property tax relief, the state gives us permission to provide it for people with disabilities, for people who are seniors, for people who are veterans, and not for everybody. But we do what we can. And this one would include Cold War veterans along with all the other veterans that are included in the laws originally passed. Let's see. An interesting thing came up. The highway department pointed out that we have an old barn on the former location of the highway facility on Bald Hill Road. And Keith was afraid that the barn might fall down. So we moved the stuff out of there. And he asked the board to decide what to do with the building, either to take it down or fix it or move it or deconstruct it. Zach Larkins, who's much involved local resident, came in with a suggestion that that would make a great place for a covered skate park. So the board thought that was an intriguing idea, and we're looking into that possibility for that building, rehabbing it and using it as a part of a skate park, sort of a covered portion of it at least. Not a bad place for a little park like that, very close to the center of the hamlet. We're going to have to replace Paul Hansen on the board. There are interviews scheduled for doing that at the upcoming meeting. And I'm trying to remember what else is on the agenda. We have been absent EV charging station for some time. We're looking into coming up with something to replace those missing chargers. And there was a county study done, an RFP, that identified multiple purveyors and picked out a couple that were particularly intriguing or looked like they had the best deals. But the experience to date of those who tried to follow up on it has not been positive. But Jim Holohan, who former board member who's acting on our behalf on this, has found at least one purveyor who could do a turnkey, as in they'll build it at no expense to the town, installation, with the town then having to make some arrangements for operating and maintaining it. So that will go before the town board this meeting in order to entertain whether we want to investigate that further. What else? We're looking at following through on a Clean Energy Communities grant for the town hall, which will allow us to do an update. Well, not an update, an improvement of the energy efficiency of the building. And we're probably going with installation of heat pumps for that building to replace the gas furnaces that have been there since the new addition was built. And that's what's going on.
Thank you, Joel. All right.
Might I ask Joel a question? Quick one, quick question, quick answer.
If it's quick, since this isn't the
Sure.
town board meeting.
With respect to the charging station, are you looking to continue the same model, which is basically free? Or do you intend to set something up that would make money for an outside company while providing very little benefit to the town?
Interesting way to put it. We probably will be doing a hybrid, but it hasn't been fully discussed because the model for these companies, all of them, is that they make money on the usage. So they they either have investors that provide the capital to install them, and then the usage is what pays the investors back. They're expecting a higher rate of return on their investment than they would be getting if they invested it elsewise. And so that's the business model, variations on the theme. The one we're looking at now is instead of it being all investor driven, it relies on a couple of subsidies from the NYSEG has a Make Ready program that would provide $25,000 towards the cost of installation. And then there's additional money from the DEC that could make up part of it so that it mostly covers the cost of installation. And the developer makes the money on basically marking it up but handling the development and installation costs on our behalf. So that's a rather long, short answer, but that's where we are.
So
More
you're
about,
saying,
this will be talked about more. This will be talked about more at the town board meeting on Thursday.
All right, on to our development reviews. Thank you again, Joel. First on the agenda, 20 Nelson Road. We have reviewed this before with the Waldorf School. And we first need to do the seeker right before we can do the public hearing. Yep. So I think now that we've clarified the question on the archaeological historic site information, we can move on to part 2 of the short form. And unless anyone wants to look at it on the screen or has any reason to say that anything is moderate or large or large impact, we'll assume everything is little or none.
And I provided
Okay.
a draft resolution
Yep.
for next day.
I guess the only thing I'm wondering, that is this gonna be, this is just to us.
It's just,
right?
yeah, it's just.
Okay,
for-
so we don't have to like put anything in there
No.
clarifying why we have all that written. Okay, sounds good.
It'll be part of like the record of the case file. It's-
oh, that's that.
Yeah, okay. Hey Ted, can you mute, please? If you can still hear me. Not even there. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion on the resolution?
Sure. I'll move.
All right, any seconds? All right, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now,
And what number was that? Cindy? There's fast. Figure I might as well capture them, well, right here, otherwise I'll forget to add them later.
okay, so now we will open public hearing. If anyone has any questions or comments regarding the subdivision, if you want to put it on the screen while our public hearing is open. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me. You can hear me, right?
Can hear you.
Yeah, we can see
Okay.
it.
So I listened to Greg's explanation of the archaeological site. I'd like to see the town do 2 things. And this doesn't really have, this is very general to this particular hearing, but we have done 0, and I've complained about this recently, 0 in dealing with archaeological buildings in the town of Danby, and we're losing them. And I would like the planner and the town to start taking advantage of some of the money that is available for archaeological buildings. But the second thing that I'm concerned about, particularly with this site, is that, as you probably know, 96B running between Ithaca and Owego is a well-documented Indian trail. And this particular site, 20 Nelson Road, overlooks Cayuga Lake and has a view of the lake. And I would like to make sure that we don't start allowing people to chop up Indian homesteads. So you know, I want that to become a consideration in these sort of situations where it's possible that land could have been used as an Indian homestead. Other than that, I don't see any problems with dividing the land, although I'm not sure I would approve some sort of dwelling or business or what else on that land. I did see something on the map that concerns me, and that has to do with T.G. Miller. It said that there was a 3-rod right-of-way on the road, and I'd like them to prove that there's a 3-rod right-of-way on that land or on that road. And that goes back to my current lawsuit against the Tompkins County Highway Department and the County of Tompkins in taking land from people on South Danby Road. So anytime somebody claims that there's a 3-rod right-of-way, I would be suspicious about it. But it would have to do with the history of the road and whether or not a 3-rod right-of-way was established at some point in time. And you have to remember that right-of-ways on roads altered from time to time. So it went from, you know, 1 rod to 2 rods to 3 rods and back to 2 rods and back to 3 rods, that sort of thing. So I'm just pointing that out, and it really isn't any of my business or my concern, but if this were my map, I would be asking the surveyors to prove that. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Hey, Rhonda, I'm just curious, where is that note about the 3-rod?
It's right about where what is it called? The Pompeo, this
Oh, yeah.
little, where it shows that they own on both sides of the road or something like that. It's hard
Okay.
for me to see. The map is very small. But when I looked at it before, right along the road, it said 3-rod right of way. Here it
Yeah,
is, right here. 3-rod right of way.
49.5 feet, yep. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that is reflected in the property deed.
Well, it would have to be, in order to be a legal right of way. This is my contention when I appeared before the Supreme Court in Albany. And my contention is that unless it's actually something in writing, then there isn't a right of way. So if it's on the deed of these people that there is a 3-rod right of way, that's fine. Then they have one. But on South Danby Road, not anybody has anything indicating that the Tompkins County Highway Department has a right of way on South Danby Road.
Would anyone else like to speak on the public hearing? Questions, comments? Nope.
I have a short question. Well,
Yep.
If you wouldn't mind just pulling up
Sorry.
people on
Yeah,
the
it's
Zoom.
and I got a meeting on the last stage of that technical, so apologies. We live, my family lives at 67 Elster Road, which is just across from where.
Sir, could you please speak a little bit slower
Yeah.
more slowly, excuse me, it's an adjective.
Yeah.
Just for some of us seniors.
And could you remove the share so we can see what's going on?
Well, he's showing you where he lives on there.
I'm just showing where this.
So we live across the street from where the easement or the right of way, sort of access part of the parcel would be. And we're generally supportive of it. We think it's a great idea. The school, you know, they subdivided the parcel that we're on and the neighboring parcels to earn income for developing the school initially. And we enjoy being next to the school and want them to be financially successful, and we're good neighbors with them, so we're appreciative of that. We never heard about this from them until we heard about it from other people from the counties or from the towns. That was surprising. But I guess our main concern is just There's the environmental or the conservation easement on the southern edge of the parcel across the road, across Nelson Road. And from what we understand, that's still being discussed, but that will probably keep that from being developed, which is fine. We didn't have strong feelings either way. It's nice having the forest there. I guess our main concern is that the farmland would stay as farmland, and so just wanting to see if, you know, if decisions with this parcel in question today and the conservations below would have any impact down the road potentially on preservation of the farmland on either side of Nelson Road that's still there.
So the question is, does the current subdivision impact or can it sort of keep the current use of land as agriculture here and conservation on that southern part?
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, we were talking before the meeting, Greg, and I'd heard this also elsewhere. You know, there was, when they initially subdivided the plots that we're on, and now there was some discussion around how trying to maintain as much of the space as open space as possible. And so over the years, we just want to see if there's any bearing this could have on prior intentions, carrying those forward in terms of open space conservation and specifically farmland conservation. So it's a tough question without a clear answer, I assume.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious to know if that's been part of the discussion or if there's any if you guys have any insights into that.
So we have not put any additional restrictions on any of the properties under the subdivision to date. And there's no specific development proposed for the new lot that's being created right now. So we haven't designated specifically like a buildable area versus a non-buildable area. And we don't, under the simple subdivision, I think we're a little bit limited on the existing to remain property. We could potentially put a little restriction on the new lot, but we have not taken that path as under the review the way it is right now. It is pretty well set back, so it's like it is back behind where the newly fenced area of the tree farm is. So I think that, and there is, you don't see it on this, but there is a good portion of that lot that is currently wooded versus the ag land that's more field, like, well, I guess you can kind of see it. You can see that like somewhat wiggly line is where the forest is. So most of that lot is forested currently, and there's a small portion of it at the front that I guess you would consider
And there's the
field.
The gas line.
And the gas line runs through it, yes. So there's definitely easement on the gas line where there would not be development within whatever boundary of the gas line.
Yeah, again, we're supportive of that lot being developed, subdivided and developed. We were just more curious about whether or not, especially with their intentions to subdivide the forested lot and then putting the brakes on that and deciding not to for now at least, about whether, like, what the intention is or if there's been a discussion around the farm itself.
Yeah, well, I guess a couple things I can weigh in here, and it might be helpful.
Laura might want to respond.
Yeah, Laura might want to respond to that as representative of the school, as well as to Joel, because he might have some background too for that former subdivision. But before that, open it up to Laura and Joel. Right, so just to comment a little bit about the conservation area, that's about 11 acres in the southern part. It's this whole rectangle, and it goes up a little bit into here. As we talked about before the meeting, as part of the approval for this cluster subdivision here, these 4 lots here, the planning board at the time in 2006 placed this large swath as conservation area. And in what we understand is that that conservation area remains. It was pretty clearly put there by the planning board, and they had the authority to do it. What's a little bit unclear according to the town's attorney now, is exactly what does conservation mean? If you go back to the old 2006 regulations at the time, it was clear what they meant, but according to the attorney now, and we rely heavily on the attorney for advice in this situation, is that because those specific conditions of conservation weren't directly put on the approving resolution and this or the approved plat at the time, it doesn't, it's not as airtight in terms of exactly what conservation meant. So the suggestion was to have a conversation with the school to say, look, you want to sell off this piece of land, which right now they don't, they're not proposing that, but if they ever did, the town has to keep this conservation area, knowing that, you know, selling a piece of land as just conservation area might not be the best return on your investment. Maybe there's some sort of middle ground. Maybe the owner could show a very small buildable area. I'm just making up numbers, say a 1 acre sort of carve out, as if you wanted to buy this property to build a home, let's say, and the zoning really just allows a home and very, very limited uses. You could have that, but anywhere else you would have to remain untouched. So what I'm getting at is that at the time that this piece of land is to be, or if it's ever proposed to be subdivided, that's when sort of more airtight restrictions would probably be placed on it. In terms of the farmland, there wasn't anything formal reserved about the farmland. There were notes in past approvals about the school wanting to retain a large piece of land for farmland. But I think at this time, why don't we just open it up to Laura just to comment on, and then Joel, why don't you go after Laura? But I just want to make sure that but I'm not speaking for the owner here. So Laura, you want to chat about what's been talked about?
Yeah, hi, my name's Laura Hayes. I'm the school director at the Ithaca Waldorf School, and we have, so the farmland that we currently look at, basically looking out the window, is what you see is the community garden, the UPIC garden that is maintained, well, was maintained by the Youth Farm Project. They are looking to move off of our land, and our school is considering taking over some, helping with this UPIC farm together with a full plate CSA share, that they are currently maintaining that, or did it last summer, and our farm teachers helping them. And we hope to grow our own educational farmette, so to say, or little farm program to teach children more and more about how to make their own food and grow their own food and create community around growing food, just like the Youth Farm Project had this in mind, especially for BIPOC adolescents, I believe. So we would like to continue in that vein of growing food for the community. And currently, again, we have the help of the Full Plate CSA collective. And we currently want to maintain those fields because as you might know, the fields are not easy. Like the soil is not the easiest to work with and to grow stuff in. And this has happened now for several years on those plots. And so of course we don't want them to follow. And yeah, so we plan to continue those gardens and to maintain them as best we can.
Thanks, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Joel?
You know, my comment doesn't have any relationship to any of that. It was sort of picking up on what Rhonda said, about the 3-rod road. It's my understanding that, almost all the roads in the county are established not by, they don't have a defined width. They're roads established through use. It just sort of came into being. And the width of the right of way is based on how much has been used by the public. So it can be more or less than 3 rods. It's an unfortunate reality that the surveyors have facilitated the muddying of the water by, in some cases, when they do surveying, indicating that there's a 3-rod road when there's no legal basis for doing that. And I don't know whether they did that in this instance, in which case, if they basically put put it on the map as being there, then they sort of ceded the property to the middle of the road, was what most of the old deeds go to the middle of the road, or all the way across it if it's a divided property where the road just happened to run down through the middle of it. Just a comment for, you know.
Thanks, Joel. Anyone else for the public hearing?
Did you get your question answered or?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just want to say again, we're highly supportive of the Waldorf School, you know, being able to do what it needs to thrive. And we love living next to the school too. So it's not a question of us supporting, you know, school. It was more just curiosity around how the conservation piece in the South might play into this, around if there was any idea or thinking around what the future intent was with the farmland. Part of why we moved to the spot we were was because of the Waldorf School, and part of it was because we really appreciated having farmland next door where you know, there was the educational opportunities both through the school and through the youth farm project. And so we would just be sad to see that go if that were the case. So, you know, anytime something new happens and there's some change, you're always kind of wondering what's going to happen to the parcels next door to you. And you're always hoping that the things that you love about the place will either stay or be enhanced somehow. So that was just our curiosity, you know, and that's why I came down tonight, just to see one more. So thank you guys for on the board, and Greg for answering, and thank you, Laura, for sharing some of your thinking as well from the school perspective.
Laura, did you have something else you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that at our Mayfair Saturday, May 3rd, you're all welcome to come and enjoy not only our maypole dances, it's open to the public, that fair, but we are also planning to showcase more of our vision for that farm. So if anyone wants to know what else we are envisioning to happen with that land, please come May 3rd, it's a Saturday at the Mayfair.
Sounds good. Thanks, Laura. All right. I will now close the public hearing. It looks like we don't have anyone else wishing to speak. Does anyone on the board have anything else to discuss or review? All right. Then if we would like to make a motion on the draft resolution for minor subdivision.
For preliminary and final plat approval.
Oh, sure. I'll second. Yes. I have. Scott. Yes.
Yes.
Abstain.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, great. So Laura, the subdivision is approved. Kelly is the chair here. She'll sign all the copies that were dropped off by Amelia. And then you can come pick them up. So I'll just coordinate with Amelia and when she can pick them up, and then they just need to be filed with the county within 62 days of today. And that's that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so informative to go through this process. We learned so much more about the land we didn't know we had to know. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the, I don't know what I'll call it. The development review for 60 Jersey Hill Road. We are looking at the sketch plat review officially under cluster subdivision for one lot into two lots. Cluster development. And I think we want to just give Jacob some further feedback on any thought on the plan, any further information to be documented as part of the, we're doing preliminary, something about being able to do preliminary and final, is that right?
Yeah,
So I guess just to get all the documentation for the final, map that will be submitted and reviewed for approval. To make sure we have all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted on this cluster subdivision.
do you want
You-
to say anything?
No, I just wanted to know what I have to add and so I can get it back to you and see what the board says.
All right,
Yeah, so as you all know, right, we've looked at this for a couple months, and so, this could be a pretty sort of short discussion. There was a lot of discussion last time that I think there was really good focus from the board and from Jake too, just about, making sure it all works well and there's benefit to both, town and owner. So really, this is just kind of like a sum up of that, I think, and then what Jake should do is then just prepare the final plat. Sort of the steps that I've outlined to him are probably between now and the March meeting, prepares a final plat, showing conditions on each area, or proposed conditions on each area. Coming to the March meeting, the board does seeker review. And then the hearing could be that night, it could be in April, but basically between the March and April meeting, I would get feedback from Guy just to be sure that everything looks right in terms of the intention for both. Conceivably, I could try to get Guy's input before the March meeting. It just really depends on when we can get the plat back. And Guy had asked that seeker be done first, just so the board can have an opportunity to weigh in about the environmental impacts of this. So with that, I'll share on the screen just kind of where it's kind of landed since last time. And something, so this is Jake's property in black. He came to the board initially with this sort of diagonally hashed lot. It's a 5-acre lot to subdivide off using a cluster subdivision, and where the board has kind of landed is said, well, maybe show a developable area. What I did is just did a really simple measurement of just this red area here. There's a lot going on this map, so let me just we'll talk about the red solid line is 10 acres. Now, we could start talking about conditions for the developable area in terms of what's the max number of lots or max number of dwellings and or lots, and then for the open space, what's the condition there? Something to just be aware of is that in the zoning law, in this zone district, that there's a 600-foot separation distance from existing structures. Even though in new cluster subdivisions, that means that you look at other existing primary structures in the area, measure 600 feet out from them, and there can be no other primary structure in the cluster development in that 600 feet. The existing house in the cluster subdivision, I'm not going to count as that it's part of the cluster subdivision. Okay. But this 57 Jersey Hill Road, 600 feet does cut in significantly in terms of the development potential in this area. So you could leave it at this. It really eats into, I don't know, I didn't measure this out, but I would, if this is 10 acres, this might be 2 or 3 acres. Something to consider, and this is also the question really for Jake, is maybe instead of this lot being up here, that the developable area is more of a square like this, and this lot is a little bit smaller, but that way that this area is sort of opened up a little bit to that developable area, because right now you've got this restriction. I'm not saying one way is more right than the other, it's just something to consider that while things are still kind of squishy and moldable. So in terms of your new house, it wouldn't be able to be located in that red hashed area. It'd have to be set back a little bit further. And any other dwelling unit that Jake ever wanted to build or subdivide off just could be, impacted, or the new structure could be in that.
So, Greg, the land, we allowed for less than 600 feet on Bruce Hill Road in that cluster. Can we, that's correct, isn't it? Yeah,
Did you send it to the BZA?
that's what I'm wondering, can we just decrease, probably we can look over, just as an aside, when we go over the cluster revision, we might want to think about 600 feet, because that seems like a lot. But at any rate, can we just say, as the planning board, that it doesn't have to be 600 feet, that it could be less, or does it have to go to BZA?
I would think if the
And-
board, yeah,
Well, if it did go to BZA, can we toss in our 2 cents? If we're inclined, I don't know how we're inclined, but if we're inclined to say to the BZA, we think it's good to make it 450 feet or whatever, can we do that? Is that procedural?
it's not required, but you certainly.
We
think
can do
about
it, okay.
Yeah. Now that Bruce Hill, I know that, I don't have it up right now, but I know that there was talk of sending it to the BZA. I don't believe it, does anybody remember, did the
cannot remember.
planning
I don't
board?
This Bruce Hill?
remember that.
Bruce Hill,
It's Dan Hoffman's property and he
you know where
owns
Bruce
about,
Hill Road is?
Yeah, but I don't remember this application.
Oh, okay.
it was the only cluster development that's happened since the zoning.
I'm totally blanking on that.
I'm just thinking of the one we did where it's like the siblings. And that was like a weird one too, but the other side of the road was not buildable. So that's the only,
Oh,
Yeah,
but that's not the one. That's not
No.
Bruce Hill.
I also,
Okay, yes, I just found it.
oh, okay, no, but,
So I think the history was that he was asked to go to the BZA, but then in that time, because I see in the file, there's a area variance appeal, but there's no decision by the BZA. But in the decision document from the planning board, it says that the planning board agrees to reduce the 600-foot cluster spacing requirement so long as the parcel is placed under a conservation easement as
Oh.
proposed in the application. So the board in that instance felt they, you are allowed to modify setbacks, distances.
Yeah.
When you do a cluster subdivision, you can modify a lot of dimensionals. So I guess the board felt comfortable to reduce that 600-foot separation distance in that instance. If it was a better design, essentially.
I mean, almost by default, it's conservation because we're saying this area can't be developed. Like now this new application will have a conservation sense, right? Because it can't be developed.
Right, unless somebody in the future.
The
appeal
zoning
that.
change. Okay, yeah.
although I checked it and I don't think it really matters because I think it just barely touches the line. But if this is a house, then there should be 600 feet from that one too, and it just barely touches the line.
Okay,
I just think that doing the 600 feet, I don't know, can we discuss it now? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
We're going against like our other guidance, which is like shorter driveways to have less environmental impact. Like it's already a flag on it and we're forcing the applicant to be, and all development to be,
Further back.
yeah, like a heavier footprint. I know we're not having a footprint on the whole thing, but this needs a longer driveway and it's gonna be more, it's just gonna be more costly to get services to it.
you're saying it would actually be a better design if the buildings would be allowed.
Yeah.
Close.
It goes
Right.
against all this other guidance we have for the hamlets and so,
Mhm.
it just seems like a conflict of we're encouraging shorter driveways for the most part for less environmental impact, but now because of the, yeah, it's like,
can have everything closer to the road and then you have more open
Yeah.
area behind it and stuff. So.
Yeah.
I
And to be honest, when we first started talking about it, I didn't even consider
across the
houses
street.
on the other side of the road.
I know.
Like in my
Yeah.
mind, it was always, what's the next house on your side that's gonna like be your next door neighbor, not the one
Right.
you're looking at on the other side of a two-lane road.
Yeah, and if the regulation said, except houses across the street, but it's just.
Right, but it doesn't.
No, like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would be open to reducing that distance. I don't know what the number would be.
Yeah, we could
or
figure
like-
that out, yeah.
But maybe if it's, like you said, like 450 or 500 or something, that gets it a little bit of breathing space, but it still allows you to develop at least like half of that front
So in the-
section.
in the interest of keeping the back part of that proposed lot a little bit more open,
But then I think it's also like, if we're talking about more units, like
Right.
what are we putting on in terms of the developable units, and then where might those someday and
We'll see.
the unforeseen future of who knows what's in the magic 8 is gonna happen, what would, where does it make the most sense for those to be placed on the lot also?
Well, saying 3 more, because that would include my house and the new one that's going in, so you'd have a total of 5.
Okay.
so for a 60-acre property,
50.
Jake's suggesting
Oh, no.
a total of 5 units.
Okay.
That would account, even though he might be afforded 6, allowing 5 sort of takes into account, any buffering that might need to be in place, stormwater facilities, any public roads, if any, that would be cutting through here.
It's assuming approximately 2 acres per dwelling, but it might, how you actually carve that up might not end up being exactly 2 acres, but.
Right, it might not even, and whether it's a new lots or dwelling units, it could be conditioned as such.
Yep.
Does that make sense? So that's what I'm hearing, so one condition would be no more than 5 dwelling units in the developable area. Would they be attached, detached? Allow both types?
I mean, I'd be open
Right.
to allowing both.
Yeah.
There's benefits to both, depends.
Is this the precedent that we are going with for clusters? Where, basically he has to cluster all the structures instead of there being a minimum of like 3, let's say, for example. Like if he has the rights to develop 5 dwellings here, this precludes the idea that he might cut off like 2 10-acre lots over here on the other side. And he has to develop all of those 5 potential units within this developable area. I'm just wondering, is that too restrictive? I don't know. I'm just curious what you all think. You think all the units should be clustered?
I think I think for the property owner, this is not great for their property value. I think just to force everything here, because who's gonna wanna buy something behind, it depends. If the property owner's the developer and can finance, like a multi-unit or something, people need housing, people might live there. But if someone's looking for single-family residential, which is mostly what development becomes, they're gonna want more privacy. So it's a little tricky. I mean, the spirit of clustering, I think, is important. I think just the layout of this shape is tricky. Like something that looked like across the street would be more valuable land.
Yeah, if it's friends or family members, it's great.
Yeah.
But the resale would be tough because they'd be like, why do we have our neighbors right on top of us?
When you keep in mind, it costs about you know, on average, like for stick built, like 500,000 to build new. So,
Colleen, you're saying that.
I mean, I don't know if I
It's
should say
not-
this, it's like a, you
No,
know,
no,
wearing a
that's-
different hat than,
I wanted to ask you another question too. So you're not saying that it's the clustering per se, you're just saying the way this.
I think that this
cluster's
is just,
designed.
yeah, you're just right, you're gonna be, and yeah, again, you're on top of your family, it's probably a deal, but if you're on top of, you don't
Well,
know, you know.
So. But would it be reasonable to say that the clustering might open up an opportunity for like a starter home level, smaller
Well, smaller,
lines for, you know, young folks or whatever.
a smaller lot
Clusters.
is just more affordable.
Yeah, it's more
Yeah.
affordable.
And shared infrastructure could be more affordable.
Right. So that's a component of the clustering that's,
Mhm.
I think that's something we would probably want to encourage.
Well, I think it depends on
Having-
how you look at, sorry, I interrupted you. I thought you were done. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it depends on how you look at the development, like if you were gonna do, if you're thinking, you know, these 5 things in a row kind of layout,
Mhm.
then it probably doesn't make the most sense in this layout, but it could also be that perhaps in the future, the driveway comes up the property line, goes across the back and back down, and you're doing back-to-back houses.
Like
in
the
which
ones we
case-
just saw across the street from Nelson, how they have theirs lined up.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the middle part of, Old Town where I live, like the middle section, we're back to back and then
Right,
then
right.
there's like 2 that go all the way through and then it's back to back again. And you're kind of like sharing backyards in a way and it's,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah,
that
that's
is
okay.
a developable,
yeah,
a development model that's been looked at in the past. And it's still applied sometimes today where you kind of have that back to back. So I mean, it could be that even just, you know, again, making it a little bit more square.
Mhm.
It could be developed that way rather than stacking them all up on the road also, and it still keeps it condensed.
And then they have a
But,
nice
yeah.
view of the acreage
Right.
instead of the road.
Right.
Well, and
Oh, that's.
I've
yeah.
run into
Yeah, yeah.
people in my age group where with potential of there being one of what was a couple or something of people wishing that they could do things that were smaller,
Mhm.
easier and close together. So
Yeah.
that you had someone else who was, you know, also maybe somebody can drive and somebody can't,
Yeah.
or you look in on each other.
Yeah.
I think there's.
So
a
get
lot
ready to
of-
build your future house in the backyard and give your house to your kids.
Well, it's just
Mhm.
realistically.
Yeah,
Taking care of a house.
Yeah.
Is a
Yeah.
lot of work.
Yes.
And there's a point at which I'm kind of, but I'm kind of at the point where I'd rather not have that.
Mhm.
You know,
It could be something like the Blackhawk model too, right? Where it's really about the farmland and engaging with the farmland in
Yeah.
a way, like
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
rather than trying to be a suburban more
Right.
development, right?
right.
yeah.
Yeah, if you're not trying to sell off a parcel at a time, then I think there's just a different way to look at it.
Right.
I mean, just taking a look at this and, you know, we're not developers and that's not the point
No,
there, but just
right.
like, you know, right, so this lot gets 1 lot here. This is Jake's home. Okay, in the future he wants to add another unit for his son or his family member here. And then he wants to subdivide this off here and so the barn can be converted to a home or maybe it's beyond repair and it becomes a house with another ADU in the back. So then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you've got 5 units.
Yeah.
And then you've
Yeah.
already maxed out your potential.
Right.
I mean, that could just be a scenario there. But back to the point, I think of, is this a goofy configuration? I think maybe just asking Jake that, because right now you propose this lot here and you've got it all drawn up by the surveyor. I mean, is this something that you see a benefit to maybe bringing this line down here and having it cut across so it's just a little bit more square? To give, would that be in a better interest?
I can discuss it with my cousin on it.
Mhm. And again, I'm not saying one might be
Make
better
sense.
than the other, it's
Yeah.
just,
We just want to do it one time. I mean, it's
Right.
whatever the owner wants,
Yeah.
obviously, but just, you don't want to keep having to redraw and draw.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, or if this is, you know, if
But it
there
follows
is an issue with this, then.
the regs though, I mean, the way it is right now, it would work.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah.
Just need to make sure what we're approving is what they want.
And they could easily put an ADU at the back of that piece too, instead of putting 3 or 2 on more on the other one
Right.
with their future units.
I'll get with Eugene Miller and I'll have something brought back and with everything on it.
Yeah, so what are the conditions? It's so developable area. No more than 5 units, attached or detached.
And then definition on what open space is.
Right, so you had provided, you had suggested some language
I
about,
forget what
it was,
it was really vague though. It started to list out some of the uses, I think, and I can't even remember where I found that. Is in reviewing one of the many documents we reviewed as part of our subcommittee,
yeah,
like 3 meetings ago.
farming, forestry and passive recreational uses only, no structures.
Right, which I think I was just saying, like, that might be a good starting point, and if, you know, you wanna elaborate on that and propose, I mean, obviously, agriculture is your intended use for the foreseeable future. I think we just wanted as the town to have some definition to what that is, so we don't end up with a very vague definition of a conservation.
no 4-wheeler tracks.
I mean, that's sex
We'll keep
recreational.
doing agriculture, I think he's gonna.
he's talking like the neighbor.
Oh,
So is this to the point, I think where Jake is gonna ask a surveyor to put this out on a plat? And then it gets reviewed next month.
Is there any reason, so like, we already know it's proposing a building, I'm sorry, Ted, well, when we have a wall, I'll get to you. They already, so they'll have to have, I always forget, it's the county that reviews the sewer septic?
Yeah.
Health
So-
department.
Health department, yes, so that they'll have to review for the proposed new structure, which we wanna see on here. But then, do they have to have anything reviewed, or we just say because it's 10 acres, it's probably has enough capacity to do a total of 5 dwelling units? I mean, because I mean, you're not gonna be able to propose a full design at this point, because you don't even know where the structures are gonna
Yeah.
go.
So if all the structures are on one lot, they're all owned by one person, there's a little bit more flexibility
Okay.
with the size.
Yeah.
It's when you start having separate
Separate.
owners and separate lots that are owned by different people, that they have that 1 acre lot.
Okay.
kind of demarcation.
Okay,
So that being said, I don't think 10 acres to 5 dwelling units would be an issue.
would be an issue, yeah.
But they would
And
look
based
at
on
it
our
at the time,
experience, yeah.
they would look at it at the time of when a new home is being built.
Okay, so we'll probably just wanna see the new unit, the new dwelling located
Well, will
on
we-
the proposed lot. Do we wanna see that? Cause
are
we
we
know it's
seeing
gonna
all
happen.
4 new lots, or are we just seeing?
I think we're just seeing the one that's
Alright.
proposed right
Okay,
now.
and then we're just
they're saying
designating
that
it.
they can have 3
Yeah.
more after that.
Oh, so we're not designating. Are we? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm making a start over, but when he comes back to us, he'll have where the new house will go,
Mhm.
but then will it also be lined, like marked out where future development will go, or
Well, right now,
just
the
our
red line
house.
is the future development.
that is it?
You can go more or less, the board can
I'm
go,
sorry.
no.
I just wouldn't know what we're
don't
going back to
apologize.
see.
It's a really unique case that isn't reviewed often, so there are a lot of questions. The board could be very, very restrictive and say, we wanna see exactly where new lot lines are gonna go, we wanna see where new houses are gonna go. You can also put it as a note, just saying that this area is not to be anymore. In the Bruce Hill case, that one, I'll just pull that one up just as a really quick example of that one.
That is yours a grand divergent from where we are now.
I just want to show this before.
Okay, good.
we go. So
Okay,
this is
we're
what the
all
board
safe.
approved. This is Bruce Hill. Now, there's a lot of green going on. This is because the owner also did a conservation easement, so there's different zones, like a protected forest zone, an ag and forest management zone. Don't necessarily pay attention. This was in 2022 or, yeah, 2022. What the board approved is this is the only cluster development that has happened. This is all the owner did, which is pretty elementary in my opinion. But he just drew and said, this is where our buildings are going to go. It's a huge lot, 100 acres or so. Maybe not quite that big. Might have been 60 acres, but saying here's where all these new units are going to go. A future main house site, future garage, site of current house, site of barn addition. You know, here's the thing: if he were to come in and say, where this one is right now, I actually want to locate my future main house over here, I'm not going to make him come back to the planning board. But
It's in that
because it's in the envelope.
Yeah.
He called me the other day and asked to put a shed kind of up here. And at first I said, no, I don't think that'll work. But when I read the conservation easement, and it does allow a shed up there as part of the forest management or ag management zone at least. So what Jake is being asked to do is basically carve out a cluster building envelope. And that's what that red area is denoting.
Okay.
You know, it would be good to have some notes in there, kind of like this. You know, even just saying no more than 4 more additional houses. I mean, we have the existing home, no more than 4, or you're going to show 1 on the proposed lot and then maybe 3 down here. It'd be good to start showing something like that. But Jake, this is kind of the only reference point that we have here at the town of this cluster development proposal. But it has gone through, it's got the blessing from all the boards involved, and it works. So this is kind of what you're being asked to have your surveyor just draw up. Again, don't look at the green lines, because those are something that's with the conservation easement. So, any questions on this from either Jake or the board?
Yeah, and I don't think we want to totally tie his hands on stuff, because
Right.
because then you do have people that want to do it. You may be in a situation where there's things that they can't do because we put in too many things. So.
I agree with Jody, just thinking about it. What we want to do now is just set the parameters. Just do the envelope. We may want to say, you know, when it is developed, we want to see the lot lines or whatever. But,
Well, yeah.
I think it's,
And designating how many lots and
Yeah.
stuff, we should do that stuff, but
Yeah.
beyond that, who knows who's gonna. someday
Right,
come
what
up to you and
creative-
Say, I'd like to live on part of this
Yeah.
land,
be creative.
yeah, cause
Yeah.
But to be clear, so the applicant, you're just asking to develop 10 acres of your 60-acre lot. Like, that's the,
Originally just wanted to subdivide 5 acres off that.
but now out of all 60 total, he's restricted to 10, but he wouldn't have to be restricted to 10, right? Like, that's more restrictive than it has to be. This is the part where I'm stuck on it, you know, but if this is what the applicant's asking for, then yes, this is approvable.
It's not like, and yeah, that's a good question, because there's no rule, there's no standard saying you need to withhold 80% of your lot.
Right.
The regulations
Square off the
use,
whole thing if you wanted.
yeah,
Make it 15 acres or whatever it ends up.
Because you're
being.
giving up property, you development rights. And so that's where I just right? Like, this is what this would,
But if you want to run
Restrict
a
his
farm,
development.
ag, you kind of want open land like that.
Yeah, but he owns it now.
That's what I was trying to
you're
ask before.
right.
I agree with you, Paul.
So we keep talking about the Waldorf school property. And the regulations at that time required 60% of the land to remain as open space. The board actually, in that specific instance, actually threw that 60 number out the window and they modified it down to like 45%. I don't, they just were modifying numbers left and right. And the board can do that when you do cluster subdivision. Danby's new regulations don't require a certain percentage of the land to be set aside. This was just a literal shot in the dark. We're just saying the board feels uncomfortable looking at a 2-lot subdivision as a cluster subdivision, where there was a lot of hand wringing on that. We don't know. So the middle ground is saying, well, why not broaden it out to about 10 acres? I think I came up with that number, just saying, why not just carve out a 10-acre development area? Jake could have easily just said, 10 is way too small. I'd like to have, I want to have half my property, 30 acres, be set aside as developable, and I'll retain 30. And then the board and him could have sort of haggled back and forth.
Right.
But right now, we just sort of shot for 10 and Jake is saying he's okay with it, at least in theory. So, you know,
said that if you.
that's kind of, that's kind of how we've landed on these numbers. That seems sort of like they're like these rules. They're extremely moldable right now. Again, we go back to just that. That's why I asked the request of the planning board is, does this meet the intent and purpose of a cluster subdivision, you know, and all this other stuff? Because the purpose of the cluster subdivision and cluster development is that there's the owner is retaining some of their rights, but also that there's a benefit to the town. You know, significantly modifying dimensional standards in the zoning law is a huge undertaking. So there has to be some balance to that to the town. The town stated goal is to preserve open space. So did this go too far in one direction? That's just between the owner and the board at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, yeah. The request needs to come from the owner, I think, if that's what they're asking to do or not asking to do, I guess, but yet as it is, we could approve this. This is beneficial, you know, to open space, but I'm always coming from we also need housing. So if, you know, down the road, you know, this might feel restrictive. So again, it has to come from, I think it has to come from the applicant, what it is you're asking for, rather than us trying to say like, just do this, because we came up with this number.
Well, I just want to say though, that that's not quite though the entire like truth behind it, is that the planning board is pretty clear in all town law, the town subdivision regulations. The planning board could say, let's say Jake was proposing to subdivide the property into 6 10-acre lots. And he came to the board and said, here's, I want to chop 6 10-acre lots. It all meets the subdivision regulations, approved, you know, this is how it goes. The planning board could say, we're not going to approve it like that.
Right.
I think Colleen's point is that we shouldn't be proposing to him what to do. We should be reacting to his proposal.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we kind of stepped in, and I stepped in a little bit more because this hasn't been done. The only other one is that Bruce Hill Road.
Well, and the initial proposal was confusing, like, so I understand how we got here, but.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's, yeah, there's a myriad of kind of different things, I guess. Jake, are you comfortable with 10 acres? I mean,
I'll come back with,
You want to talk to family, right?
yeah, I'll come back and have something for next meeting and we'll talk it through and get it all figured out.
Okay.
And with the driveway thing, could that be reduced as far as like the 600 feet?
It looks like there's precedent where the planning board felt comfortable enough to reduce that distance. And, you know, under the, you know, it's a cluster development, they're allowed to just modify that as part of that, right? As if there's a clear benefit. It seems to me there could be a benefit of you're keeping the back part of the lot and you're reducing the amount of infrastructure, driveway utilities.
And there's kind of a precedent
Mhm.
around
Mhm.
that area for, things being closer to the street.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think right now
I'll come back from TG and have everything drawn up with suggestions on it and.
Yeah.
Have a better. That works. Now that I know what has to be done and,
Yeah.
as far as that.
Okay. Ted, you've been very patient.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's, sure.
I have 3 points. The first one is sort of off the wall, but I think it's worth mentioning. When you talk about possible uses for the land that's set aside, the open space that's set aside, you might consider allowing septic, underground septic wastewater for the other houses. Just a thought. Now, second point, I find myself very uncomfortable with your discussion over the last 10 minutes in at least one respect. You have if I'm correct, this is a proposal that the applicant provided, and you are adding considerations about property values, and more or less you're telling him you're being too hard on yourself. In fact, this proposal, and the reason I think that it's pretty reasonable, is because it does provide a very clear advantage to the town in terms of open space. And here you're telling him, go think about this proposal. Are you really sure you want to do this? You're working against what you should be doing, which is to maximize the value of the town. And I just find that backwards. And the third thing, that 600 foot, I'm not a lawyer, but if I see a set of rules called a zoning ordinance, which includes an escape clause that says for cluster subdivisions, you can ignore rules. And then there's a separate section that says for cluster subdivisions, 600 feet is a minimum. I don't see that you can ignore that. You can make a recommendation to the BZA perhaps, but if he wants to go less than 600, it's right in there. It says for cluster subdivisions, it must be 600. You can't vary the area requirement, the distance requirement here. That's a BZA thing. You know, that doesn't make sense to do that. Why would it be written in there if it was intended that you should have discretion? Thanks.
Joel,
Say some of the same thing. All of the points regarding there was a long back and forth in the process of rezoning between two schools of thought. One, the houses should be close to the road so to preserve the maximum, to minimize the disturbance to the unbuilt environment. And then the alternative school of thought was the houses should be back far enough from the road so that they are not severely compromising the rural character by their proximity. So, because once you line the road with houses, it feels like suburbia, no matter how many hundreds of acres there are behind. And that 600 foot, well, we used to have a 200 foot frontage requirement for lots at all. We abandoned that 200 foot frontage requirement in the interest of allowing more flexibility. And 10-acre density, which translated into either a 10-acre lot or a cluster alternative. But the cluster alternative had that separation distance as a compensating mechanism that would assure that the cluster would not be all lining houses up along the road. That separation distance meant that there would be some undeveloped road frontage because the cluster would have to be spaced out. And it subverts the purpose to say, well, it'd be better if the houses were close to the road. Well, they could be close to the road if they want a house across the street. But, and frankly, Kelly, I don't think we were thinking about the fact that there might be a house across the street.
if you have the 200 foot, like the 200 foot frontage would not affect the house across the street. You wouldn't be building.
Right,
200 foot
right.
frontage is on your side of the street.
Yeah.
And is we're preserving what, like, I don't even know, 1,800 feet of road frontage. I don't know, whatever that is, 20,000, I don't know, some extreme amount of road frontage. with the open space that's being preserved.
Right.
But at the same time, I recognize that it is in code as 600 feet and that, you know, we may be discussing that on the subcommittee, but right now that is what's in the code.
This
So-
is something that we're talking about and in fact, I have a proposal that would modify this, but we're not there yet. And this is where you got to contend with what's there now.
So I'm just gonna add about in looking at the town subdivision regulations to the question of can they modify the separation distance? I don't see why not. So the supplemental rules and regulations for clustered subdivisions, the town board has empowered the planning board to modify applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance in the review and approval of clustered subdivision plats. The purpose of such authorization is to enable and encourage flexibility of design and development of land in a manner that promotes the most appropriate use of land, facilitates the adequate and economical provision of streets and utilities, and preserves the environment and the natural scenic qualities of open lands. If there is a reason to modify any applicable zoning provision, the planning board may do it as part of a clustered subdivision.
Except that in this case, it's a specific restriction on the granting of clusters.
Understood.
Okay.
So you feel like you have direction?
I got
Okay.
direction.
All right, sounds good. Are we still having no project?
Looks like
review?
not,
Okay,
looks like not.
whoever was supposed to
Yeah.
didn't show or
No.
dropped off.
Yeah,
Okay,
I guess I'll lead that into my planning report. Yes, the Design Connect project with Cornell is underway. We had a site visit last week. Joel joined. And yeah, the student said she wanted to join tonight to give a little presentation. But I guess
I get rolling.
yeah. So we're gonna do another site, I guess, so she's not coming out live tonight. We're doing another site visit this Thursday because it's a large group of students. We're gonna have our first public engagement session, March 5th at the Danby Food and Drink. So once a month, it'll be the first Wednesday of every month, 4:30 to 6 o'clock. I'll just be at the Danby Food and Drink or another venue in town if anybody else invites me, but it's almost like an open office hours, just come in and just ask the planner questions. And so we had about 20 people show up
Nice.
2 weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really good. It was a great turnout and good questions, some tough questions. There were some questions about the sewer project going on here in the hamlet. So that's, but yeah, the one on March 5th will be the Design Connect project where we'll just unroll a big map and start talking about, hopefully get a lot of residents there and start talking about what people envision for the property.
Who do you have on your team? Is it planners, architects?
Yep.
Landscape architects or?
I should ask for all their background. I didn't hear of anybody saying they were a landscape architect.
Architects and planners?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm hoping they have some landscape architects because it's such a big site and it needs some.
Need some love.
It needs some landscape, it needs some love, yeah.
No.
That project is gonna be very quick. I mean, it's only gonna go through May. I anticipate that they'll probably give a presentation to the town board, probably the first meeting in May, final presentation, so please stay involved. I was hoping the student was joining because she probably wanted to ask you all to be involved in some way or another. But at least if you can, I hope that we'll have a few different engagement sessions. First one, Danby Food and Drink, maybe there's one here, more like a design charrette style, but we've asked them to incorporate the Hamlet sewer project into their proposal. Otherwise, they're creating lots that are 1 acre in size with houses on them. So asking them to be a little bit more dense in their proposal. That's going on. And then the sewer project, I mean, this is just trying to get all of the questions answered about what it means to accept this large grant from the DEC. What other funding sources do we need to look into? And then in terms of forming a sewer district, these are all kinds of questions and process oriented things that need to be fleshed out before I think the town feels comfortable enough to accept the grant. But it's something that I know Joel is working on too, and myself. Other than that, those are the largest ones. We're starting the new homeowner rehab grant with Toma Development Consultants. And the regulatory review committee, we met again last week to just look at some zoning tweaks. We've gotten through a few that are fairly straightforward. We think could be passed on to the town board. The general goal is to have maybe a batch go to the town board in about the middle of the year. If anybody cares to know what they are, I can certainly talk about them now. Otherwise, I can share them all via email, what we've kind of come up with.
You have a lot?
There's a list, but they kind of range from what we think are fairly straightforward and ones that are probably everyone generally agrees on to ones that are more like maybe these deserve a larger community conversation. Let's see. I can share the ones that have kind of moved forward a little bit more, moving into, we could probably move these on to town board as you all know, they were here in the Hamlet neighborhood. I guess we're in the Hamlet Center now, but the Hamlet neighborhoods, certain uses are only allowed on corner lots.
Mm-hmm.
So like restaurants, places, food and drink business specifically. The proposal is just to allow that also on any lot fronting 96B. In West Danby, it's still staying as corner lots for the Hamlet neighborhood, just because that state route is a little bit more windy and less sight distance, that maybe allowing restaurants and food places along that road might not be that safe, but
And they have more corners.
they have more corners. I think we figured out that.
People can fly.
They do.
The other one is allowing, a lot of these recommendations came up because of the Danby Food and Drink, actually. So the other proposal is to allow existing structures in the Hamlet neighborhood to be reused for other allowed uses without having to meet setback or parking location requirements. They still have to go through site plan review if they require site plan review. But Karthik, he's in the Hamlet Center, but he had to get variances because of the setback. It's an existing structure, basically allowing rehabilitation of existing structures a little bit more easily. In the Hamlet Center, that was the same recommendation too, allow reuse of existing structures, but also without having to go through site plan review by the planning board. I should say, unless the structure is 4,000 square feet or more, which includes an addition, or the site is disturbed by a half acre or more. So many questions on that one, because that one was a lot to unpack for our committee.
Partly because of just the language.
It's a language, yeah. Basically saying anything in the Hamlet Center, so it's not that many parts, parcels here and then down by the Gathery, and then down in West Danby in a very concentrated area, allowing those structures to be reused without having to meet setbacks or parking location, but also not having to go through site plan review if the structure and any addition is not more than 4,000 square feet and it's not disturbing land by a half acre or more. And the reason why we chose 4,000 square feet is that anything less than that for commercial uses is exempt from seeker review. Anything more than that has to go to the planning board or some other board for seeker review. So like, for instance, I can't, as the staff of town, I can't do seeker review. So that's why we picked 4,000 square feet. And then the half acre was because of the town's stormwater law, that anything half acre or more requires a full stormwater pollution prevention plan. You want me to clarify anymore? You just look like you might have questions on that. Yeah. So for instance, the Gathery is more than 4,000 square feet. If the Gathery wanted to reuse its building for something else, it would have to go through site plan. If the building next door to here, it's just a single family home, wanted to be reused for something new, like a coffee shop. I'm just gonna pick on coffee shops. they're less than 4,000 square feet, they would just be reviewed by myself and the code officer. So the trigger is the 4,000 square feet, and that's just in the Hamlet Center, not the Hamlet neighborhood. We felt that Hamlet neighborhood is still very much a neighborhood, and you probably want any change of use to go through a site plan review. Like you're in the Hamlet neighborhood, I think you're on the very, maybe not, maybe you're in the,
I think we're on the line.
you're on the line.
Mhm.
Okay, you're probably in the Hamlet neighborhood.
On Bald Hill.
Yeah, so like if your neighbor wanted to convert to a coffee shop, again, picking on a coffee shop. I guess they wouldn't be able to, because they,
Yeah.
no, I guess, yeah, it's not on 96B.
Yeah.
Never mind, so,
But yeah, like a daycare,
Daycare.
schools,
Yeah.
hospital was the
Yeah.
one that I was like, oh.
yeah.
Well, they were talking about where the solar farm is now. Originally, they talked at some point, like, wanting to develop that into like a neighborhood kind of behind there.
Oh, okay.
And having it streets and smaller lots, and that's where they wanted everybody to kind of cluster into the neighborhood hamlet.
Hmm.
But maybe I think it did talk about some restaurants and we'll say coffee shops even,
Yeah,
but having that all kind of centered there.
no, yeah, well, the coffee shop or any food or drink serving business, it's still limited, at least the proposal is for 96B. Or
Or
if you're-
corner.
Or corner,
Which there aren't as many.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
I hope they're gonna do ice cream in the summer.
Mm,
I liked it when there was ice cream at the list.
Yeah, used to go there.
I would walk around the block and get a cone on the way home up the hill.
Sounds nice,
Yeah.
let's bring that back. So those are the only
Use the bike road.
3 proposals that have received at least some blessing from the larger committee. And so what we're doing is sort of putting those aside for now, and then the plan is
Next batch.
handling the next batch. Other kinds of things that are being looked at are there are a number of them.
I still think a daycare would be a great,
Yeah, if we could do it.
if we could do it, yeah, because the cars that are coming in from Cantor and Owego and stuff,
Mhm.
to be able to just
Yeah,
get someplace, not have to pay for parking and have to deal with the parking downtown and
also,
stuff.
it's an allowed use on 96B, and then, in the neighborhoods, they'd have to get approval.
It just would be
It's a
so
little
convenient
easier.
for people.
We originally lived in Owego and Liz worked up here and it was quite the commute. And also then the closest we could find, I had to go to Vestal, to drop off my kids for
Oh.
daycare from Owego. So you had to have something
Yeah.
here. would be
It's
perfect
really
for a lot of
needed.
people. Yeah, I mean, when they can charge as much as they do for daycare around here, it needs more competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like college tuition.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Daycares.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Other,
And there's waiting lists.
huge waiting list.
so this committee is made up of 3 planning board members, so Colleen, Kelly, and Scott. And then town board is Catherine, Leslie, and Joel, and then myself. We've split off into 2 subcommittees. One subcommittee worked on what I just talked about. The other subcommittee that Kelly's on, and Joel and Catherine, and Scott, are looking at cluster, like the cluster subdivision provisions and just housing in general. And is there a better way to look at kind of residential development and lot development that still isn't, rooted in preserving open space, but also allowing a little bit more flexibility. Some of it's coming out of some of these discussions here. So I think that committee has a little bit to go
Yeah,
on providing something concrete. But otherwise, the other committee that's like we call it the catch-all committee, looking at maybe exempting or modifying the setback distances in the Hamlet neighborhood. So right now in the Hamlet neighborhood, for every type of use, you have to build between 10 and 20 feet from the road. So maybe exempting or modifying the setbacks for a single family or a 2-family home is appropriate. So what I'm going to do when I can find some time is I'm going to do a little analysis to measure every distance from every structure from the edge of road, and just to see what's an average here. It probably depends on the road.
We
So-
talked, oh, I was gonna say, we talked about electronic signs.
Yeah, I wasn't even gonna
I
bring that
know,
up.
maybe don't.
Yeah.
I think we squashed that one, maybe.
Yeah, so the electronic message center sign down at Fire Hall, and last year, upon my recommendation, I recommended, let's just ban these townwide. And that might be just where it stands, but the Danby Community Church, Pastor Ed over here came in a few months ago and asked for an electronic message center sign for the church. And I said, well, the town just banned them, they're not allowed, and but I thought I'd bring up to the committee is this something maybe we could just, committee want to entertain this, maybe just in the Hamlet Center, it's a really small area, maybe you modify their technology. There's a lot of regulations you can do on these signs. I don't
And
want
then you showed us the technology and we all said, never mind.
Yeah, you can regulate down to the very specific technology of these signs to make them be higher quality or dumber, technology, less intrusive on the eyes. It can get really complicated. I worked on an ordinance a number of years ago and took us a long time, but the committee generally felt like, no, we don't really want to entertain this, so we might leave that on
On the banned list?
yeah.
We're at the bottom of the pile.
At the bottom of the pile, it's like we're not, there were a few absolute no's and a few people that said maybe, so. Site plan review for certain agricultural developments, so as a heads up to those on the committee that I'm on, so thinking about certain agricultural uses that might want to have events and music and weddings, and at what point does ag become more of like an event center? And there is some guidance on this. The line is a little bit unclear at the moment, but at some point the town can start to regulate some of those activities. So I
Like
think,
South Hill Cider.
so, and even Guy has said, you can kind of rein some of that non-ag stuff back in. So I think we should look at that soon, because some wedding and event season is coming up.
Greg, are you aware of the Casanova, the town of Casanova, the whole kerfluffle up there?
No.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. Using the ag and markets, they planted a few grapes and then it became basically an event center. And I can't remember how it got resolved, but I think people went to court, the town took them to court or whatever, so there's a wealth of precedent up there if you wanna.
Well, and
Check
South
that
Hill
out.
Cidery has expanded tons since when it started. And the parking on the sides of the road is,
Yeah, we had the place from just a block or two up where they owned a farm that was down on East Miller, I think. And they wanted to use like the house on that corner to be like a little ag restaurant,
that's right,
remember?
yeah.
So we went back and
Yeah.
forth with them quite a bit, and then he finally just said no, because it was just stretching it too much to what they wanted to do compared to, they wanted to end up doing a restaurant, but calling it an ag place, and they just.
Mhm.
and a farm stand,
No, it wasn't a farm stand, that's for
which
sure.
is where they started from, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened at South Hill Cider was entirely predictable when the town promoted it.
So is that how you're doing this process? You're just thinking about all the things that have kind of hung us up over the past?
There's a list, and we're
years.
just going down the list.
At least since I've been here, I mean, I came in and I think it was, with the market over here, there were just some things that felt like they were really
Mhm.
just, obstacles. And maybe it was about my interpretation, maybe I could have just waved some zoning officer wand and said, oh, you don't need a variance and you don't need to forget about the parking going from the building. But it felt like the proper thing to do is to apply the code strictly and to say, you're changing use, it requires a new setback. So in the parking location. So this is just making it a little bit cleaner,
Mhm.
at least for that. Yeah, so those are generally the ones that are being looked at right now. And maybe a change in the cluster, how we do cluster subdivision. I think with Jake's proposal, you know, and I'm not just saying this because he's not here, I think that this could be a decent way to, if somebody were to come to the board and they're really having a hard time with meeting, let's say a 10-acre lot minimum, they've got, you know, a large tract of land. The board might be able to point to this case as saying, well, you know, if you, this is how it was done before. But yeah, you are severely kind of giving up some rights, or you're really you're consolidating your rights. So it's not like, you know, I think I think Jake wanted just to have the subdivision just approved like that, and I think the board was rightly a little concerned with just moving forward with it just like that. And I've shared that with them, so I'm, you know, comfortable saying that.
But I have a question about that, because isn't our role not just to do like what benefits the town the most, and also to not place undue burdens on landowners? Isn't that, am I wrong? Like, is that what our job is, like to try to balance the two?
Yep. Yeah, I would say so. It's, I mean,
And-
you're,
And I'm of the mindset that housing and preservation are both.
Are both benefiting the
And
town.
and we're just looking at the balance of it,
Yeah.
yeah. So-
Mhm.
yeah, the two don't have to be exclusive of each other, and I think that's what I'm finding really exciting about this position here with Danby, just to be frank, is that I've come from like a conservation minded background, but I also worked in a very urban area in my beginning of my career, and I feel like there can be a way to, you know, allow people to, and especially as someone now trying to build a house and live here, and instead of renting, you know,
Yeah.
just trying to set down roots, and it's basically, we were like priced out of this county.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just had that reality a few years ago. So, yeah. So yeah, the goal for this committee is to just pass some recommendations along to the town board. As I said, probably in batches, maybe one in the middle of the year, one by the end of the year. The end of the year usually gets pretty tied up with budget, and it's an election year too, so we'll see how much we can get done by the end of the year, but definitely by May or June, there'll be sort of a batch being presented to the town board to consider.
To go through the process.
But I'll keep you updated, and if you have any questions, certainly on anything, if you know you want more clarification, because reading these things off is sort of like second nature to me, but I think it's good to, I was saying this committee, it's good to have to explain it, because
Yeah.
when I go to the town board with them, based on recommendations from the committee, I want to be able to explain them and the reasoning behind them as a good way to move forward. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask me, because it helps to think things through a little bit. If you think about that.
Thanks for your extra time on that, everybody.
Yeah.
So you're gonna measure the distance from like the ditch in front of our house to where our house is situated is what you're thinking about?
I'm not gonna be going up and down the road with a measuring stick. I won't be doing that. I have building footprint data from the county. And I've done this in other towns. I did it for Trumansburg when I was up there, but yeah, just doing a little analysis of what's the closest point of your house to the street, and I'll figure out the edge of the
I'm just curious why our house is on a diagonal.
yeah. So
That's
I'll
pretty unusual. The other houses on our road aren't.
oh, you'd be
Get
surprised.
sunlight or something.
I don't think so. Actually, it was a good thing, because the way they situated it, because of the issue with the lot next to us, which we've at least been told it is too wet to build on, is we really only have one window where we actually see any of the other houses.
That might be why.
Hmm?
That might be why then.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that they did it that way. But yeah, it makes it so we don't see neighbors out our windows really. Only one across. Not that, huh?
I hate people, so that'd be great.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I grew up on a house with 100 acres. so-
Okay, yeah.
Out in farmland, so.
Well, this analysis will take the closest point of your house.
Yeah.
I won't even have to tell the program was supposed to do it. Yeah. it
I've
makes
just
sense.
been curious, cause I don't think there's other houses on our road, some are built back further, but that somebody did that.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Meeting adjourned. We'll see you in March.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Kelly.
Thank you.
So it's funny because when
Good night.
we had
Zoom land.
all that, land- well, we didn't have all that land